Kate Neal Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. It's time for our Saturday book. And we are going to continue with video number 3 of Final Events by Nick Redfern. And the subtitle is The Secret Government Group on Demonic UFOs and the Afterlife. So let's see here. This is a wild ride, this story. So interesting. And there are hints of other things that I've read other places. So I'm not finding this terribly surprising. Anyway, we're on video number 3, and we're starting with chapter 12, Late Night Liaisons. August 30th of 1962, Ann Henson, a 16-year-old on a dairy farm. Now, this is, I should preface this by saying, if you remember from our previous video, the elite, Collins elite, were able to get some formal documentation of narratives of UFO experiences from people in England. The Ministry of Defense, probably Nick Pope, gave them these stories. And this is one of them. Ann Henson, 1962. She was on a dairy farm. She was 16 years old. She was asleep. She got awakened in the middle of the night by a round ball of light in the sky that was changing colors. And it had rays of light coming out of it. It wasn't a star because it moved around. It wasn't a helicopter or a plane. It was completely silent. And it did all kinds of weird moving around. It went backwards and forwards and right. It got closer and farther away, right and left, up and down. Changed sizes as it moved. It always returned to the same position, exactly the same position over the hills that were outside her house. And eventually, it went down to the size of a pin and disappeared. Came back the next night, and this happened often enough for her to get used to it. And she started keeping a record of it on graph paper, like where it was and how long it stayed and how far it seemed. It felt friendly to her. It didn't feel like a threat. After seeing it a few times, she decided to report the contact to the Royal Air Force. So a guy turned up at her house one evening, knocked on the door. He was in an old car in an odd dark suit and said he was with the RAF, but he seemed oddly odd. He came for 3 nights in a row and sat in her room with her and watched the sky. And he did finally see this object on the 3rd night. He took photographs of it. He didn't seem surprised. He was kind of low-key in his reactions. He did take the notes that she had been keeping, the graphs and documentation. He told her, you probably don't want to tell anybody about this. Nobody's going to believe you. And she told her family, and they had just laughed at her. So she was embarrassed anyway. She was 16. She got a report back from the Ministry of Defense. You just saw Planet. Don't freak out. But Redfern is saying this is a classic Man in Black appearance, except that we know about it because the file on her has been declassified, and it actually identifies the guy as a British RAF employee, Royal Air Force employee, in a department, the Elite Provost and Security Service Department. It's equivalent to the United States Office of Special Investigations. He asks the question, why would such an important government organization care about a teenage girl's UFO story in England? Why? The written report was very detailed. They took it seriously. And it happens to mention that her mother had seen it too. The report says, the Department of the Air Ministry will investigate this case. And officially, they said the Air Intelligence Office says she was perceived a celestial body. Now, there's another story, the 8th of November of 66. Now, remember, they mentioned that there was a commonality. Interference with the car, young girl late at night. Many, many, many stories that seem to follow that pattern. The first story we just talked about, Anne, she wasn't in a car, she was asleep in bed, but they often happen in the middle of the night. This one, November of 66, Diane Fox, who was 22, was driving in the middle of nowhere in the evening and was scared by a UFO that followed her and shone a beam on her car. And later she realized it left a burn on the outside of her car. But she reported it, and she was told by the RAF it was nothing. But it turns out that this was not her first encounter. November of 64, she saw a circular light, a circular lit up object in the sky, and she freaked out. She accelerated away from it and went home, and her parents saw it. It sat stationary for 30 minutes after it followed her home, and then suddenly got smaller and disappeared. She said it was a bright yellow light, and as it got smaller, it turned red. Then there was this other sighting that I just described, where the beam hit the car and burnt the car. When that happened, she said she felt an electric shock and severe neck pain. When she got home, she felt nauseated. She felt sick. Her family told an investigator of a neighbor by the name of Mr. Griffin, who had claimed to have made contact with the object and gone inside of it and met ETs. The RAF denied evidence of the UFO. The elite, though, they took note. The Hills, Barney and Betty Hill in New Hampshire, they lived near NICAP board director Admiral Herbert Knowles. This is the National Investigation. They are the group that's studied these stories early. Betty and Barney Hill lived near him, the head of this UFO organization, nationally known. And they also lived very close to automatic writer Francis Swan. They had lunch. They had lunch with Knowles and his wife. The elite believed that Swan was, okay, these are the guys inside the military and CIA intelligence who are convinced we're talking about demons. They believed that Frances Swan, the automatic writer woman, was chosen by demons because she lived near Knowles. She knew him well. She would tell him. And then Knowles would be deceived through Swan, who really believed she was communicating with aliens, into believing in aliens, Knowles into believing in aliens, and he would convince the national organization. In other words, they said that what was going on was a Trojan horse demonic invasion. And the Hills were chosen because they knew Knowles and would sow the seeds of belief in aliens to distract people from the demonic truth. I have a feeling this is going to make a very interesting conversation with Denise and Deborah from the Cosmic Fold when the three of us discuss this book. We have not talked about it. We're not going to talk about it until we get together to record the conversation. And I just feel like it's going to be really interesting. So now we're on chapter 13, The Black Sorcerer. Victor Marchetti, the former high-ranking CIA guy is a professional term, said that in the late 60s, the CIA tried to get a medium to contact and debrief dead CIA agents. So they had CIA agents that had died in the line of duty or died with knowledge they hadn't divulged yet. And so the CIA hired a medium to get the information. This is official, which, if you know how uptight these people are, it's kind of remarkable. The claim was made this was part of a larger effort to harness psychic powers for intelligence missions, especially to get clairvoyants to read the intentions of Kremlin leaders, the Kremlin leadership. There's a book called Unmasking the Enemy that's all about this. But this program here led to shocking discovery. In the 60s and 70s, the world of espionage was full of occult-like demonic things. For example, here's just a little taste. The world of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, PhD, chemistry from California Institute of Technology, who also had a master's in speech therapy. Sorry. In 1951, he was trying to understand and harness and manipulate the human brain. In other words, he was working on mind control. And they called him the Black Sorcerer. He began coordinating Alan Dulles' MK-Ultra at the very beginning. And he used hallucinogenics, LSD, and other types of hallucinogenics on unwitting subjects to develop techniques to crush the human psyche to get people to admit anything under the influence. In March of 1960, with the okay of Eisenhower, they put together a plan called the Cuban Project. They would spray Castro's television with LSD and put thallium, a seriously poisonous heavy metal, in his shoes to make his beard fall out. They also had several assassination plans that sound like a James Bond story. Now, just for the sake of YouTube, let me make it clear I'm not advocating any of this stuff. This is actually CIA activities from the 1960s. So this was so complicated, I could almost not summarize it. So they hatched schemes to assassinate Castro using poisoned cigar, a poisoned wetsuit, an exploding conch shell, and a poisonous fountain pen, amongst others. History has shown, of course, that all these attempts failed, and Castro had just as many lives as a cat. But these were not the only plans. Gottlieb also worked on a project to have Iraq's general Abdul Karim Qasim's handkerchief contaminated with botulinum. And he played a role in the CIA's attempt to assassinate Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba of the Congo. In the summer of 60, Gottlieb himself secretly transported certain toxic biological materials to the CIA's field station in the Congo. As fate would have it, however, a deadly coup deposed the prime minister before agents were able to unleash the deadly virus. I'm sorry, I misread that. It's a military coup and a deadly virus. So he began to delve into even darker areas, according to the book. In 1969, the CIA's Research and Development branch took it farther, using demonic powers in espionage. They got a $150,000 grant from CIA Director Richard Helms for Operation Often. That's the name of it. And we're going to talk about this quite a bit. Operation Often worked with the research of a Dr. Cameron. He was, he was trying to link, okay, this is so weird. I wrote it down and I can't even understand what I wrote because it's weird. He was trying to link eye color, soil conditions, and mental illness using black magic and the supernatural. I mean, he got money from the head of the CIA to do this. This is all documented. None of this is speculation. Cameron, who was Scottish, got into the CIA and MK-Ultra while commuting from New York to McGill University in Montreal. So let me tell you what it says next about him. So Operation Often immersed itself in distinctly uncharted waters. The staff ultimately spent more time mingling with fairground fortune tellers, palm readers, clairvoyants, demonologists, and mediums than they did with fellow agency personnel. By May of 71, the operation had 3 astrologers on the payroll, each paid $350 a week plus expenses, to regularly review copies of newly published magazines and newspapers in the hope that they might be psychically alerted to something of a defense or intelligence nature. And then things got even more controversial. This gets weird, even more weird. In 72, 2 guys from Operation Often went to the official exorcist of the New York Catholic diocese. The exorcist sent them away. 2 years earlier, a guy in the Collins elite, a Mr. Manza, had gone to the Operation Often office to see if they would work together. Would it be valuable? Make a proposition. This was 6 weeks after the end of Project Blue Book in 1969. Ostensibly after the end of Project Blue Book. There's a lot of speculation it never officially ended, went underground. But another eyewitness disagreed and said that the last day of Project Blue Book was the day before Manzo went to Operation Often's office. In 1969, the Air Force did this. Hang on, I'm going to read this to you. Had a document about research, scientific research. They kind of ordered it being written, and it said a large part of the available UFO literature is closely linked with mysticism and the metaphysical. It deals with subjects like mental telepathy, automatic writing, and invisible entities, as well as phenomena like poltergeist manifestations and possession. Many of the UFO reports now being published in the popular press recount alleged incidents that are strikingly similar to demonic possession and psychic phenomena. No doubt, members of the Collins elite nodded gravely at this revelation. This sort of feeds their suspicions or their fears about demonic stuff associated with ETs. Now we're on chapter 14, Soul Factories. This is where it gets really concerning. January 31st, 1970, Mr. Manza, approaching Operation Often, told them this story. Paul Garrett, a house painter, almost was killed in a car crash outside San Francisco. His heart stopped and he was resuscitated, but while he was dead, he had a near-death experience, and he wrote a letter to the local paper and talked about his dead state and how he saw numerous UFOs in a hellish realm. He was contacted by somebody and told that his story was of interest to the U.S. Army, specifically to the psychologists of the U.S. Army. They had been trying to work with the University of South Carolina to alleviate the trauma, PTSD of veterans from the Vietnam War, and especially the dreams they had of hell. So the psychologist for the Army, working on behalf of veterans in association with scientists at the University of South Carolina, they see this article, probably a letter to the editor, written by this guy who had a near-death experience, talking about his experience of the realms of hell with UFOs. And they said, well, thinking that perhaps this was psychological. Or so you would think, because really the people who were interested in this were the Collins elite. And Garrett was invited, the house painter, was invited to come to the University of South Carolina for conversations and more serious exams. So just as an aside of interest, Operation Often taught a course in sorcery at the University of South Carolina. Somebody from the operation with a fake name called the Scientific Engineering Institute. So students thought they were taking a course from the Scientific Engineering Institute, and it was really the government operation, well, CIA, military, Operation Often. Yeah, Richard Helms from the CIA was paying for that. So near-death experiences, there's a great, if I remember this correctly, if I remember what I read, not all is certain. This is an explanation for people who may not know. They become known, they generally refer to a broad range of personal experiences reported by people who've either been on the verge of death or who have indeed briefly passed away before being resuscitated. And the near-death experience can encompass multiple strange sensations, including detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, extreme fear, overwhelming serenity, security, or warmth, the experience of absolute dissolution, and the presence of a brightly lit tunnel, but not always. They seem to have changed a bit since this was written. With some people interpret as a deity and others perceive as a gateway or pathway through which a person ultimately enters into the mysterious realm of the afterlife. Garrett So he came up to the edge of this tunnel of light, and he said he fell into it, and it was cold and dark, and he was falling at high speed, and he considered it possibly going into the pits of hell. He said he saw a never-ending, utterly flat, light blue, sandy landscape dominated by a writhing mass of an untold number of naked human beings screaming in what sounded like torturous agony. Purple sky filled with hundreds of flying saucer-like objects, pulsing and throbbing, almost as though they were living entities of their own. They raced back and forth in the sky. They seemed like metallic soldier ants or worker bees. He never felt the calmness and tranquility that others had reported. In his mind, his disembodied life force, perhaps, was in utter turmoil as he watched the flying saucer-like craft suddenly slow down their movements to an eventual standstill high above the mass of people below, bathed every one of the people in a green, sickly glow, and small balls of light seemed to fly from the bodies of the people into the green glow and were sucked up into the flying saucers. There was a deafening silence. The people rose to their feet as one and collectively stumbled and shuffled in the hundreds of thousands, across the barren landscape, like in a zombie movie, towards a large black hole that had now materialized in the distance. Suddenly, Garrett said he felt disoriented, and the next thing he knew, he was groggily coming to his senses in a hospital bed. Thanks to the work of the doctor, he firmly believed that he had been spared the wrath of the grim reaper and the devil himself. Garrett was not religious, but he believed that he was at the gateway to hell, and he witnessed the harvesting of human souls by UFOs, and then human zombie-like characters stumbling into hell. The first night he was home, he reported that he woke to see a large-eyed goblin standing by the side of his bed staring at him, and the question asked is, was that a gray? 4 days later, his house started having poltergeist activity. Later, while watching TV, his daughter went into a trance state and began screaming in an unknown tongue, and then collapsed into a brief, deep sleep. Garrett believed that he had seen things he should not have seen and that they had followed him back from where he had gone in his NDE. He believed that these entities had to be invited into your life. How they interact with us depends on what we allow. Very like the 1955 Round Trip to Hell in a Flying Saucer. This was a book that was written, or was an article. Well, self-published work, so I guess it was a book. Following the sighting of a mysterious disc over Bakersfield in 1952, two men in old-fashioned garments materialized by this guy's car. One day, about the end of the year, he found himself going on a trip aboard a saucer. The craft went off into space, eventually arriving at a bleak red planet with a lake of fire into which coffins were cast, the dead bodies inside them coming to life and burning in agony. He was afraid he would be trapped there permanently, but apparently he was saved by a vision of Christ that appeared in a beam of white light and returned to Earth. The trip seemed to have taken 4 days, but only 4 hours had really passed. Here, the scientific trappings are kept to a minimum, the main narrative being a familiar, mystical one, the vision of Inferno, very Dante-esque. It would be interesting to know Michael's religious background. And then, of course, we have communion. And Whitley Strieber's uncle was in the U.S. Air Force. And in the 40s, the Air Force did a study on the ability of entities to enter into your life. And it depended on the extent to which we believed in them and accepted them or not. So Monza told this story to the CIA operation often and suggested that they should join forces, his group and the elite. And he agreed to share material with them, and they agreed. Chapter 15, The Sorceress and the Spies. So this was a name that was familiar. It really touched my memory, and I couldn't remember why I knew this name. Because this all happened when I was, in high school, and I really wasn't all that interested in any of this. April of 1972, two Operation Often guys went to Sybil Leek. She was a witch, an author. She had a pet crow called Mr. Hotfoot Jackson. They came to get information on using black magic to access secrets of hostile governments. She was Britain's most famous witch, and I took a break here from this book and went and researched her. She had a very convoluted and interesting background. She had been encouraged by her family to study nature and Eastern philosophy and astrology. She had only 3 years of school, and then she was homeschooled, but she got most education. It was in esoteric and psychic arts and divination. She was friends with H.G. Wells, with whom she would take long walks, and she was friends with our old friend, Aleister Crowley. He encouraged her to write. She was a poet. She met and married a famous pianist at the age of 16 who died. He died 2 years later. She was only 18. She moved in with her grandmother. Yes, with her grandmother, who sent her to a French coven above the city of Nice, where she eventually became high priestess. She went back to England, but she ran away to the woods and lived in the woods. She was befriended by Romany gypsies who taught her much. She was made the high priestess of the Horsa Coven and also part of the 9 Covens Council. At the age of 20, she opened 3 antique shops. I often thought that was a strange choice for somebody who had a lot of psychic, energetic things going on, because objects can carry energy from the past, and I I don't know. Anyway, she was often pestered because she'd been very open about being a witch, and so she didn't have a lot of privacy. The media followed her around. So to get away, she used to have people pick her up behind the shop at work and then transfer her to another car like a secret agent. She got invited to the United States to do a speaking tour and also to be on the show To Tell the Truth. My name is Sybil Leek and I'm a witch, that kind of thing. She teamed up with a guy called Hans Holzer. That name rang a bell too. And he was a ghost hunting guy who made public appearances and talked aloud about poltergeist activity and that sort of stuff. He did the rounds of TV shows. She moved to Los Angeles, decided to stay. She met an authority on the Kabbalah and they studied Crowley together. She fought with other witches because she did not agree. I guess there are, just like in Christianity, there are different brands of Christianity, sects. There are different sects of witches. She did not believe in nudity during rituals. She did not believe in the use of psychoactive drugs. And she swore all the time, which I guess some witches don't do that. I don't know. She was unique because she took up environmental causes very publicly. She was approached by Operation Often, and she was happy to share her knowledge with them. She had been recruited by the British during World War II to create phony horoscopes for the Nazis. They were obsessed with horoscopes, and so she was going to unbalance them emotionally by scaring them with bad horoscopes. And there's a belief, this is after the war, of course, in the 70s, there's a belief that she was still a British asset. She told the Operation Often people that she thought UFOs were linked to the occult. And so the Collins elite were happy to meet up with her in 1972. Some were really put off by her connection to Crowley. But in 1972, she had a meeting with Operation Often and the Collins elite. She slipped into a trance and channeled a demonic entity who was venomous, spiteful, and evil. Its origins were in Babylon, it said. It ridiculed that humans had been tricked into believing that aliens were among us, but they were really the forces of the Prince of Darkness and were harvesting all human souls and using ETs as a ruse. I do have thoughts about this, and like I said, we will be discussing this. Some believed she was parroting what she knew they wanted to hear because they were paying her handsomely. The question being, why would demons tell us they were doing this if they were doing this? She said because it was an insane ego that they had, and they had a hatred of humans. Well, the elite, the Collins elite, they, of course, were horrified. Chapter 16, Demons, Souls, and Fallen Angels. There was a 2007 interview with a Father Bosch, an Anglican priest, who was told all this by Department of Defense physicists. He also spoke with the Notre Dame professor who had spoken with two government people in 1972. They told him that those people were involved with the Department of Defense. They believed that ETs were demonic and engaged in worldwide deceit to get people to follow their dark ways in order to steal souls. The professor was told all this and told, don't tell anybody. He was asked to write a report on the nature of the human soul. And I remember this guy's a professor and a priest. Write on the human soul, the concept and the agenda of demons, and the role played by fallen angels, as in the Bible. And they paid for him. He wrote a 130-page opinion paper. He agreed to speak to the government, but he never heard from them again after they got this paper. And so there's some question as to where did it end up. But this is what he wrote. The soul may be derived from several ancient languages for the word sea, S-E-A. The Greek used the same word to mean ensouled and alive. They use the word interchangeably. The soul is the infinite spiritual. It can exist outside the body. It's where consciousness and personality reside. And not everybody agrees on this, but this is his opinion. Pre-Pythagoras, the soul was believed to not have life outside the body, that it descended into hell, never to return. But Plato and Socrates said the soul was the essence of the person, the eternal occupant, dedicated. It dictated our behavior, and it could be reborn. In other words, move on to a new body. Aristotle said the soul is the core of the living being, and it's defined by the activity of the being. So your soul either suffers or benefits from your actions. Is it immortal? That was debated. Aristotle believed that the intelligent part of the soul was eternal and separate from the body. But was it individual? He felt that after death, the soul remembers nothing. Persian Muslim philosophers said the soul is, they had differences of opinion. The soul is immortal, or what a human, it is what is a human. The soul is, it defines what you are as a human. And he said this can best be described as when you say I, you're talking about your soul. And what the soul is depends on the nature of the human being, the individual. Aquinas believed that it's eternal and it existed without a body, outside the body. Christians, who were a big influence on the Collins elite, believe your body went to dust after you died and your soul went to God. That soul was the breath of life from God. And that's very Jewish. To do not believe that the soul enters the body until you take your first breath. Christians describe the soul in moral, spiritual terms. Philosophers, in philosophical terms. When you die, your soul either goes to heaven or hell. Christians don't agree about much else. Some say the soul's not even immortal. But I guess I didn't realize that. That it's a life force and it's restored by resurrection or given back to God. Augustine said the soul is a special substance with reason and it rules the body. Swinburne said that people can't agree. Oh, no. The Roman Catholic Church believes the soul is immortal and created by God. The Orthodox believe that everyone is judged individually on the last day. The Collins elite feared that no religion knew the whole story, and the demons on mission to derail the train to heaven, to capture the strange energy from human souls, and the demons were unclean spirits. But they require an invitation to join you and exorcism to banish them. In many religions, they share this belief. The Collins elite, of course, were very conventional Christians, and they believed this next thing, that demons are usually fallen angels. If anybody heard my conversation with Dr. Ogi Ogas from Harvard, he's the one who had been, I guess, telepathically conversing with an alien for a very, very long time, decades and decades. Experimental mathematician from Harvard. And he told us that aliens are all different, but they're divided up into two camps. The ones that hate humans and have fallen from the source, fallen away, and the ones who love humans and want to help us and rescue us from our own stupidity, help us to evolve. They can't do anything that's against free will, but help us out. And these two types of aliens could be regarded in much the same way as the battle in heaven between St. Michael the Archangel and Lucifer the fallen angel and their cohorts. It was uncanny how similar the story was. And he says that, potato, potato, aliens, ETs, angels, good, bad, and different. So this is kind of what they're talking about here, that when angels fall from God's grace, they can't go back. In ancient Judaism and with the early Christians, they believed that demons were the result of sex between fallen angels, like Lucifer, and humans. So now we're talking about the Nephilim, the Elohim, disembodied spirits who roam the earth in search of rest, and they are hybrids. The Nephilim were cast into Gehenna, which is total darkness. Tartarus, I think the Greeks called it. Some say 10% were allowed to remain after the Great Flood in order to lead humans astray. The flood was meant to get rid of the Nephilim. Jesus cast out demons, so there is that. In terms of their supernatural ability, demons are said to exhibit psychokinesis, levitation, divination, possession, seduction, ESP, and telepathy. And in addition, they have the ability to bind and make contracts, control the elements, manipulate the animal kingdom. They regularly use variants and combinations of these powers to harass, demoralize, confuse, make sick, and disorient the targets of their assault, or the person who has chosen to become a willing subject of the demon. Christianity teaches its followers that all of these attacks can be nullified by God. Theologians say there are succubi. These are female demons. They seem like female demons, and they extract sperm from sleeping humans. And then there are incubi, who appear to be male demons who fertilize in their sleep female humans in order to create hybrids. There's much debate in the centuries about this in all kinds of church cultures and circles. But ETs sound like demons to some people, according to the Collins elite, like the alien abductions. They kind of sound familiar to them. Abilities exhibited by our purported extraterrestrial visitors are eerily similar to those that demons are said to confidently command, including levitation, ESP, psychokinesis, the taking of sperm and eggs, part of a truly sinister and unholy program centuries ago, are nearly identical to 20th and 21st century stories of purported alien interaction with the human race. The morning star is Venus, the planet Venus, and it's often said to have fallen from heaven, as are the fallen angels, banished by God, as Lucifer was, and sent out from heaven, fallen from heaven. Lucifer means the carrier of light. The ETs often claim that they're from Venus. That kind of gave me the creeps. There was a war in heaven because the angels have knowledge of all things celestial, and they rebelled against God. He thinks he's so tough. They rebelled against God. And of course, St. Michael and the good angels knocked them out of heaven. And this rebellion was unforgivable because they're supposed to be so knowledgeable. So the war in heaven, Lucifer against Michael, often represented by Michael killing the dragon. And I wonder about the relationship to the end of goddess religions, but we're not there yet. The Collins elite actually got experts to say how many demons, they counted them, how many demons fell from heaven like Lucifer. And it was a very large number. I didn't copy it down, but I could tell you what it was. 266,613,336 angels remained loyal to God. But the rest, 133,306,668 sided with Lucifer. That freaked out the Collins elite. Okay, I'm going to end here. It's a little early, but I haven't made any more progress in the book. So I hope that this is interesting for you, and it's kind of starting to give me the creeps, which seems really appropriate this time of year. And thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think. Keep your eye open for my conversation about the book with Denise and Deborah of the Cosmic Fold. We get together every Wednesday night. Watch my community post. I try to put the link there so you can join in the conversation with us. It's live. It's on Deborah's channel, so don't worry, I'm not going to mess anything up. She also has a telephone number you can call. It's pretty fancy. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Slongafoil, slancha.